The world has ended and the protagonist doesn't feel fear, despair, or even distaste. He feels excitement. We are taken to a flashback to when he was working as an office worker when he was an overweight loser who couldn't even hold a conversation, let alone make any friends. In this society, having social skills is very important if you want to fit in. Surprisingly, the protagonist did archery as a kid and by the looks of it he did well, but now all he is doing is wasting away at a computer with no family. Even in his workplace barely anyone knows his name. Then someone shows up inviting him for lunch. His name is Adam. He is the opposite of the protagonist. He is a born leader who can do all the talking for the protagonist. Normally the main character declines going to lunch because it's too awkward, but he thinks Adam will be different, so he accepts his invite. As they wait for the elevator, a lady called Carolyn who works as HR and another lady joins the men in lunch since Adam invited them. In the elevator, Carolyn takes to Adam saying he might get fired if he uses the company card too often. She then turns to the MC and points out it's strange that he is joining them. Suddenly the elevator shakes, making everyone startled. Adam tries reassuring everyone that it's most likely an electrical issue. Just to prove him wrong, the elevator shook even more violently, making everyone brace themselves for something. Adam yells the protagonist's name, which is Jake, to push the emergency button. He does so, but Carolyn points out that nothing happened when he did. The lights immediately went out. Adam asked if everyone was alright. They look up and see a system message saying the invitation of the 93rd universe is confirmed. Introduction and tutorial sequence commencing. It's not only these 5 people seeing the message but everyone in the city. A mysterious being also sees it and says more lambs to the slaughter. But it's not like he will be important to the plot or anything, right? We are immediately brought back to Jake, who is sat at a steel table confused about where he is. On the other side of the table we can see an alien-looking thing that said "Hello human." Jake immediately freaks out, saying, "What the heck are you?" Suddenly a 5-minute timer shows on the top of his head. He introduces himself as someone who will introduce him to his new reality and that they can only speak for 5 minutes. At first Jake is confused about what he meant. Then suddenly a status window pops up in front of him. Jake is confused about what he is looking at, but the alien explains that it is a system and that it shows various states and other pertinent details about Jake's new reality. The alien goes on saying that the system came to be when Jake's universe passed the minimum requirements to enter the multiverse, and that any information beyond this will be relayed to you as you need to know them. Jake isn't sure if that information is amazing or ridiculous. The alien then cuts in, now wanting him to pick his class. Now Jake takes the time to think about all the classes and then finally chooses a class that he is very familiar with, which is archery. The alien explains that the time he had to explain the introduction is coming to an end and will transport Jake to the Great Forest, which is a tutorial. The alien goes on saying the Great Forest is filled with danger or opportunity for any newly initiated races like the humans. Beasts roam the forest hunting for prey. Kill the beasts to acquire tutorial points, TP, and gain new and more powerful skills. Perhaps they will have a chance to hunt for beast lords themselves. The tutorial will last 64 days, in which the remaining survivors will be granted final rewards based on their collected TP. That is all the alien needed to say. Jake thinks that he is starting to feel excited about all this. Everyone from the elevator has now been transported to the Great Forest together, but they are all equally confused. Jake takes a look at himself and says, "Not bad." He then looks at the forest and realizes that it is massive. Adam speaks up, reassuring everyone and wanting to take a quick breather. The ground suddenly shakes and Adam commands everyone to go down and stay calm. We then cut to a party of 7 walking through the forest. Someone who looks like the leader points his sword at a bush, shouting to show themselves. A kid walks out of the bush asking to not attack him and tells he was only looking for his party. The team reassures the kid that they won't attack him. The mage of the group asks the kid when he saw his party last. The kid tells him that he and his party got attacked immediately when they respawned and got separated in the fight. The leader says the boy can stay with them until they find his party. The kid smiles and thanks them, but the blood-stained knife on the kid's belt says that he isn't so innocent. We cut back to Jake's party talking about what just happened to them. Adam tells them that it will be okay and to take one step at a time. Jake thinks to himself that Adam really is a natural-born leader. Adam says that they need to locate shelter, water, and food. Jake thinks to himself that they aren't the only survivors, and that the time given to them will be crucial for learning skills and getting the hang of the system. Adam is trying to wrestle with the moose, but he's clearly struggling, so Jake shot an arrow at its hit, killing immediately. Jake thinks to himself that Carolyn is the party's only healer, but that she is getting the hang of it quickly. It's nightfall and the party is sitting around a fire. Carolyn praises Jake for his bow skills, but Jake is only happy because Carolyn knows his name. Adam then tells him that everyone is defaulting to him because of their old jobs, but that he would like a hand when things get rough. Adam then places his hand on his shoulder, but Jake says he can't since he can't speak like the way Adam and Carolyn does. Adam goes on saying that it's a new world and old rules don't apply anymore. Hours pass and while the team sleeps, Adam and the purple-haired girl are first to keep watch. The girl suddenly says that her husband and her were going to have lunch and that they were only a few hundred feet away from each other when things went crazy. She then asks if Jake had a girlfriend. He says no, but internally he thinks not anymore and that he had one back in college and that he had only two real friends named Andy and Madeline. Andy was his roommate and a great guy. He goes on thinking that he could trust Andy with his life, and he was in love with Madeline. Neither one of them were social and they enjoyed solitude together. Jake believes that those 2 years were his happiest, but he's not sure if he just convinced himself to think that. We then come back to the present where the purple-haired girl is crying and telling that Jake may be better off alone, but every time she thinks of her husband her stomach twists with anxiety. Jake thinks that he should say something, but then she excuses herself and walks off. Jake thinks that Adam wants him to be the leader and the purple-haired girl whose name is Joanna is even opening up to him. He thinks maybe Adam was right. Things may be different here. An audible scream goes off in the forest and Jake is immediately running towards the source of it. We see that Joanna is on the floor with 3 intimidating men with weapons over her. They ask her where her team is while slowly crushing her foot. She acts dumb and claims she doesn't know. When she doesn't tell them, the guy in orange says have it your way and slams his hammer on her foot, effectively crushing it and rendering it useless. Suddenly multiple arrows shoot out. One arrow goes through the neck of one, killing him, but the guy in the green blocks. And he runs to where the arrows were fired at but is confused when he sees no one there. Jake then comes at him from behind and tries to stab him with an arrow but fails and gets thrown. The guy in green tries to slash him with his double-sided axe, but Jake blocks it with his bow. He looks over and sees that Joanna passed out but is confused when he doesn't see that guy in orange. He then looks behind himself and sees the guy in orange charging at him with his hammer. And he sees that his bow is about to break from the axe. He then looks to his left and sees an arrow flying towards him. In this moment something inside him awakened and he is able to feel everything around him slowing down. It is then revealed that he had a bloodline awakening called the bloodline of the primal hunter. He dodges the hammer, catches the arrow and throws it at the guy in orange. He then grabs a sword off the ground and slashes the guy with the double-handed axe. Suddenly arrows start coming at him in all directions, but he slices all of them looking like a badass. He drops the sword and tells the last guy to come at him. The last guy pulls out a knife then grabs Jake's cape, and when he's about to stab him, Jake pulls out an arrow then stabs the guy in the eye and then the chest. Jake's team shows up asking if they are okay, then they see Jake in the body and ask what happened. But in response Jake only said that he won with a smile. He sits up and sees a system message saying he killed survivors and got TP from it. He also gained a new skill, which is in TH unique class. The description says that dormant power lies in the very essence of your being, unlocked sphere of perception, which adds 5% to perception. Adam asks why those guys would attack them and Jake says it might have been for TP since he got a lot of it. We can see Carolyn starting to healing Joanna's bent leg. Adam suggests that they might wait out the tutorial, but then Carolyn says Jake's name and asks Jake why Joanna was by herself. Jake nervously replies because Joanna was feeling anxious and he thought that she needed space. Carolyn states that since Joanna's leg was crushed, her healing won't be enough and asks him what he thinks they're supposed to do. Jake asks if she is trying to blame him. Adam joins in and says no and that he helped her, but why did he let her go by herself, and why didn't he wake one of them? Jake defends himself saying that it was a split-second decision and that he just followed his instincts. Joanna speaks up saying that he should give it some thought next time, that they are humans, not beasts who act without care. She goes on saying what if he dies out there? Jake, getting increasingly annoyed, tried to apologize a second time for what he had done. Carolyn cuts him off by screaming what if Joanna had died? Everyone was silent after that statement, waiting for Jake's answer. Jake then snaps and yells while they get a grip and says that Joanna only survived because of him and that if he took the time to wake them up then who knows what could have happened. Everyone is shocked. He continues saying those are people, not deer. He then points at Adam and says, could he have the balls to take another person's life? He then points at everyone else saying that the world has changed and stop expecting people to give you a helping hand and to learn to adapt to survive. The blue-haired guy then asks Jake what he suggests for them to do. Jake started walking off, but when he heard the question he stopped and said that they should do whatever they can to survive and level up. Jake woke up and saw Casper sitting beside him. Jake revealed that he expected everyone to ditch him after what he said. Casper agrees and said that everyone talked about it and agreed that everyone needs to start carrying their own weight. A flashback shows that Casper was the closest thing that Jake had to friends besides Adam. They both bonded over the fact that they had pathetic romantic lives. Back to the present, Jake looks up and is surprised when he sees Joanna with an amputated foot. Casper clarified that it was Joanna's idea and they are betting that when Carolyn is leveled up she can grow her leg back. Jake thinks to himself that Joanna is incredible and that she may be the toughest one out of all of them. He noticed that ever since last night everyone is starting to really give it their all. Jake thinks to himself that Bertram, who is the guy with the shield, is the best fighter in the group besides Jake, and that Joanna is making good use of her ranged magic. He also notices that Carolyn is by far the most impressive. And he thinks that what happened with Joanna awakened something inside her. Everyone was given beginner equipment and some even got potions, but none was powerful enough to heal Joanna's leg. And without knowing how to make more healing potions, Carolyn has become an invaluable asset to the team. But ever since the Joanna incident last night, Jake and Carolyn haven't spoken a word to each other. Jake is confused on which one of them is supposed to say something first. So he is just going to act like nothing happened. An hour later we can see that Jake is blindfolded with Casper behind with dirt in his hand, asking Jake if he is sure about this. Jake confirms and says to throw it at him. As Casper is getting ready to throw it, Jake thinks to himself saying an attack is coming, just focus on your breathing, and before he could finish his thought the dirt hit him on his back. Jake is confused why he did not awaken like last time, but thinks it's because Casper wasn't trying to harm him, so it did not awaken, and he only awakens when there is an actual threat. Adam calls everyone and says that they need to find shelter for the night. They find a cave and they all agree that it looks like a safe enough spot and it will protect them from the rain. Jake thinks to himself that if he is alert that he should be able to prevent any attacks while looking at Joanna's amputated leg. Adam sees him staring and asks if Jake is still thinking about last night. Jake confirms this and says that he doesn't want to make the same mistake twice. Adam puts a hand on Jake's shoulder and apologizes for yesterday and says he didn't mean to blame him and that Jake didn't deserve that. After the apology, Adam makes his way to the front of the group and leads them inside. Jake thinks to himself that Adam is a good man and contemplates that they could have survived the first day without him and his leadership. He even admits that he's not sure if he would have been here if it weren't for him. It then shows a flashback of Adam introducing himself to Jake and telling him that he requested for them to be on the same team. He goes on saying that he thinks that they will work well together. After introductions, Adams invites Jake to lunch. Jake agrees while blushing. Back to the present, the cave starts to make weird noises. The team is weary but is ready to fight if they have to. Suddenly pieces of rocks start to break off from the cave. Jake says quickly that they need to leave. As they run, the cave starts to collapse on itself. As they are running, rocks suddenly begin to fall to where Carolyn is. Jake immediately stops running away and runs toward her to save Carolyn before the rocks crush her. When Jake saves her, the rocks falling creates a wall which separates the rest of the team from Jake and Carolyn. Jake asks if Carolyn is okay. She confirms, saying that she's fine. Adam yells Jake's and Carolyn names to check if they can hear him. Carolyn responds saying that they are there. Jake shushes her and informs her that the cave is unstable and that something might be lurking here, so it would be better if they kept their voices down. Carolyn notices that there are too many rocks to move out of the way. Bertram offers to break the wall, but Adam declines his offer, saying that they shouldn't touch anything. Adam reassures the rest of the team that there are other pathways in the cave and they are bound to intersect somewhere. Jake thinks that that might not be true, but it's their safest option. Jake tells his team through the wall that they will go further in and try to meet halfway, but he thinks to himself that they still don't know what monsters live down here as he walks forward, and that he can protect himself, but not sure if he can also protect Carolyn. Carolyn says to Jake that they will be okay and reassures him that she will not die in a cave. An hour of walking later, Adam starts to doubt if they made the right plan. Bertram cheers up Adam, saying that those two are better suited for surviving here than them. He continues saying even if Jake makes him uneasy, he confirms that Jake is the strongest one out of them and with Carolyn's healing they will be fine. Adam looks at Bertram and asks, "He makes you uneasy?" Bertram elaborates saying that he agreed to what Jake had said before and all of them need to be stronger, but Adam saw the way Jake lay down in a pool of blood looking like a madman. Adam gives Jake the benefit of the doubt and says it is because he barely survived an attack, so he would expect a bit of weird behavior. Bertram softly says that people change in times of crises and he thinks that right now Jake's a loose cannon. Adam dismisses the claim and says that Jake is a friend and that he needs to trust him. Cut back to Jake and Carolyn walking through the cave. She notices blood on Jake's arm. Jake didn't notice and thinks it might have come from the fall. Carolyn rolls up Jake's cape and is wanting to heal it. Jake is surprised and asks her if isn't she mad at him. She replies back saying that even if they had an argument she won't allow his wound to get infected. Then she tells him to hold still. Jake is confused about what to do in this situation when he starts remembering his conversation training and thinks of asking her a question. Carolyn starts scolding him a little, saying that they know that he's strong but no one is invincible. She continues saying that she's still learning magic so she can't heal everything yet. Jake decides to ask her why she chose to become a healer. She dodges the question and asks why he became an archer. He answers that he'd just pick one that he'd be best for survival. Carolyn echoes the word survival and says that is why she chose to become a healer. She wraps a cloth around his arm and continues saying that she didn't know much about the tutorial, but that she played a few games and knew healer would be the least picked class. Jake asks if she plays games. Carolyn says not anymore. She confesses that her younger brother spent a lot of time in the hospital when they were kids, and that she sometimes goes weeks without being able to visit him, so they played games together to keep in touch. Jake didn't realize that Carolyn had a brother. She blushes and says everyone has made her play healer since she was a girl. First she hated it and wanted to be a fighter, but then realized that fighters always had trouble finding parties. But being healer, people went out of their way to send her invites to join them. She goes on saying that she didn't know who she would run into, but that she knew that if she could heal she would be protected and she would survive. Jake tells her that her plan is really smart. She claps back saying he thought she was dumb? Or maybe Jake never thought much of her at all. Jake thinks to himself that she's right. He had a crush on her all this time, but maybe never stopped and thought about how she was as a person. As she finished tying a cloth on his arm, she says that he is good as new. She then says for them to keep moving. Then they both notice a fork in the path. Carolyn asks Jake what way they should go. Jake doesn't speak but looks at the wall and asks her if she could feel that. He says to her that his sphere of perception didn't activate, but it's like he could sense something down in one of the paths there. We then see blue eyes glowing in the ceiling of the dark path. He then says that something is terrifying. Jake questions what he's feeling right now. He grabs his chest and thinks that his instincts are telling him to be cautious, but a part of him is drawn to it. Jake then tells Carolyn that they are going to check it out. She is confused and says what? He tells her that whatever is down there must be strong and tells her to think about the experience points. She aggressively responds back that they are not searching for experience points and they are looking for their friends, which leaves Jake a bit surprised. He responds by saying that they don't know where their friends are and that what if the path leads them to their friends as he points to it. Carolyn sighs and says what if the path leads straight to danger? She continues by saying that the path there on now is at least the general direction where they last saw them. Jake tries fighting back by saying that there is only one path that is guaranteed to have experience points, and that the tutorial would want them to go and fight whatever is down there. Carolyn face palms and questions Jake that this is real life and what kind of logic is that. Jake looks down and thinks to himself that Carolyn is correct. He isn't being logical and the truth is that he just wants to fight. Carolyn continues saying that she gets that this is fun for him, but the rest of them don't want to risk their lives for stupid points. And that this isn't a game to them and that they are just trying to survive. Jake questions her by saying what's wrong with wanting to get stronger. He continues, saying that all of them have been given an opportunity of a lifetime and that things can be different here. They can do things that no human would think would be possible just a month ago, and that all she wants to do is just survive. She points at him and says some of us liked how things were a month ago. She says that we didn't ask to be killers as Jake gives a shocked expression. She gets close to him and says to Jake if he could just think about the group for once and stop acting so selfishly. Jake grits his teeth and thinks he's not gonna get anywhere like this. He sighs and agrees with her that they can go down the safe path. As they walk down the safe path, Carolyn thanks him. After a bit of walking, Joanna speaks to the team asking if they think Jake and Carolyn are okay and hopes they were not attacked. Casper assures her that Jake is there so they will be fine. The only tricky part is navigating the cave. He continues saying that his perception is very high but he has trouble seeing very far. Bertram says that it's getting late and that if they don't find them soon they should consider settling down. Adam says they can't rest and they should keep going. Bertram grabs Adam's shoulder and asks him if they could rest for just tonight and that they can pick up the search again in the morning. Bertram looks at Joanna and tells Adam to think about her leg. She looks visibly tired but tells him that she's okay. Adam looks down and says that they can't stop until they know both of them are safe. Casper asks Adam if he heard that but Adam tells him to shush. Adam puts out the torch as they all crouch down. Bertram asks Casper if he sees anything but Casper says it's too dark to see. They hear a tapping sound getting closer. Casper says that it's coming fast but is surprised at something. Then Adam says Caroline's name. As we see her running towards them she says that they finally found them. She jumps towards Adam and lands right in front of him with Adam's hands on her shoulder. Bertram asks if there was any trouble. Jake scratches the back of his head and is ready to confess about the argument he and Caroline had, but then Caroline responds by saying there wasn't any trouble. She tells Bertram it was just a lot of walking as she is giving Jake a look, and Jake thanks her with a nod. Caroline asks Adam if they can sleep in another cave, one that isn't so collapsible. Joanna then screams, then kills a spider with her staff. She then apologizes to the team and tells them that there was a spider. Casper kneels in front of the spider and tells Joanna to not kill spiders since they are important for the ecosystem. He then picks up the spider and walks in front of the team to put it out of harm's way. He places it down in a spot, then looks above and sees a lot of spiders coming down. He says there must be a nest nearby or something as Jake looks unshocked. Someone says maybe they should get moving but Casper says that it's fine since most spiders aren't actually a threat to humans. As we see one come down next to him, the spider gets ready to land on him. Then Adam runs to him yelling his name. Then the spider bites Casper. Jake pulls out his bow getting ready for a fight. As we see above them hundreds of spiders come down. As the team is next to each other Joanna asks them what they should do. Casper yells to his teammates that he can't move. Then, suddenly a huge spider comes out of the dark. The spider is right in front of Casper getting ready to attack him, with Casper asking help from his team. Then Jake shoots an arrow hitting it in the mouth. This allowed Adam to grab Casper's arm and run as he yells for everyone to do the same. Then Jake gets ready to shoot at the spider again as Adam looks at him worried. Jake shoots the arrow, but the boss spider swats it easily out of the air. The boss spider is angry as we see its level as being 13 with the name Mama Spider. Jake smiles at the spider. Everyone else is trying to get away. Bertram yells that they need to leave now. Adam yells to Jake to leave it and follow them. Jake puts his bow away and pulls out his sword as he apologizes to Adam. He dashes towards the monster as he says that he will not be wasting this opportunity. Jake then attacks the spider's legs, then stabs the spider's torso. Caroline tells Adam that he can't wait for Jake. Adam runs back saying that he will not leave anyone behind. The spider then lands an attack on Jake which sends him flying straight into a wall, which causes some of the rock on the ceiling to collapse. Jake gets up saying that not bad. He thinks to himself that he can feel something bubbling inside of him, that instinct. He grits his teeth and grabs an arrow as the spider pounces to him. Enro then surrounds Jake as he gets into a fighting pose. The cave starts to collapse around him. He thinks to himself that the cave is starting to collapse, but he is not running away from this. As he blocks the spider's strikes, he thinks that maybe he is being selfish. But the old life that Caroline was talking about is not for him, and while she wants to survive, getting stronger is what matters to him. Adam frantically yells at Jake that the cave is going down and that they don't have time. Jake can't hear him as he blocks and dodges the spider's attacks. He notices an attack to the left so he dodges. He notices an attack from behind that's slow. He closes his eyes and thinks if he should dodge or parry it. He grips his sword and thinks he has to strike. As we see a hand approaching him, he quickly slashes at it. He then notices that that hand belongs to Adam as he grabs Jake. Adam then tells Jake to not die for this. At first he is shocked, then he nods in agreement. They then start to run as the cave is collapsing. Joanna is worried as she shakily asks where they are. They then come out as Adam is helping Jake walk. Caroline notices that Adam is bleeding. Jake confesses that he cut him accidentally and that he thought he was the spider, so he instinctively defended himself. Caroline starts to berate Jake, but Adam cuts her off by saying he's fine. Bertram steps up saying no and enough is enough. Carelessness is one thing, but attacking another member of the group is something they can't just let slide any longer. Adam asks if Carolyn can heal it, and she confirms, but before she can continue, Bertram goes on saying that the group can't function if they are constantly worried if Jake is going to fly off the handle. Jake thinks to himself if that is how they see him, and that even Carolyn thinks he is some sort of killer. Bertram then speaks to Adam saying that he is speaking to him as a friend and that situations like this only get worse. Jake then thinks maybe Bertram is right. Maybe he is a liability to the group. Then his eyes go cold as he thinks maybe the group is a liability to him. Joanna passed out from the pain, and the worrying about her distracted him from the fight that allowed that guy to go in his blind spot. It was saving Carolyn that caused him to get trapped in the cave. And if Adam did not stop him, he could have killed the spider. He then notices movement in the bushes and pulls out his bow and yells, "Who's there?" Then a manly guy comes out of the bushes. He introduces himself by saying his name is Richard, and while still smiling he said that we heard a commotion from the rockfall and came to investigate. As he looks at Jake's bow, he says that he has no intention of harming anyone. Both Jake and Adam look at each other and nod. Adam smiles and says that it's good to finally meet other humans. Adam introduces himself and his team and says that they have no interest in conflict too. Then Richard's team starts to emerge out of the bushes while he agrees. It goes on saying that his and two other groups decided to team up through this thing, as we see the same kid from the first part. He goes on by saying that they need all the people they can get, so they would love for them to join. Adam and his team are still on guard, but Richard continues saying that he understands if they are reluctant. But working together is of the interest of everyone. He notices Carolyn squeezing Adam's arm. He then calls her and asks if she is a healer. Jake thinks that he is after Carolyn. Then Jake has a short flashback where Carolyn is saying she may not know who she will run into here, but that she knew if she could heal she would be worth protecting. Richard confesses that their healer died not long ago and that they are running low on potions. He grabs the handle of his sword and says that to be frank, he doesn't need all of them, but that they will take those who want to come. Holding the hilt of his sword firmly, he says that if their healer wanted to come alone, then that would be more than fine with him. Adam steps in front of Carolyn and says to him, what if they say no? Richard then says to him that he is a diplomatic fella and that he wants to handle this peacefully and keep everyone happy. But more menacingly he says, but he doesn't have to. He says to Adam's team that they are leaving with the healer one way or another. Jake thinks to himself that he needs to slow down and think carefully. He looks behind himself and notes that his team is still exhausted. He grips his bow and says he's the only one with enough energy to fight. He looks at Richard and thinks if he could take this guy by surprise, how many shots would he need? He then looks at his group and thinks what could he do about them. Richard speaks to Carolyn by saying they are not looking to mistreat her, and that they need her. Jake bites his nail and thinks that there are too many of them to outrun and tries to think of something to do. Adam grabs his shoulder and motions him to come. Adam tells his team that maybe they should just go with them. Joanna says that she doesn't like the way Richard looked at them. Casper gives them the benefit of the doubt and says that they may not be bad people and that imagine trying to live in this place without a healer. Adam asks for Caroline's input and she says that she doesn't want to fight. Jake is worried and thinks to himself that they are actually considering this. Carolyn taps Adam on the chest and tells him that she trusts him. Adam nods and says that they are joining them. Jake thinks that this may be a good thing. Jake confidently walks towards Richard and asks him what his level is. Richard says that he's level 9 and that they have a couple in his group level 7 and above. Richard looks at Jake and questions who he might be. Jake smiles and thinks this is perfect. Jake sighs and says he is disappointed. He continues by saying he was hoping he would be stronger. He says as for him his name is Each and his level is go fuck yourself. Adam shocked questions what he is doing. Richard is mad and he says he thought they were so close to an agreement. Jake waves it off by saying his team is joining, but he isn't since he has bigger prey to hunt. He looks at Richard and says to make one thing clear that he is leaving his colleagues to him and if he doesn't take care of them they would have an issue. Richard asks him if that is right. Jake smiles and asks Richard if he really thinks he's the predator in this scenario. Jake takes out his sword and points the tip to Richard and asks him how fast he thinks his archers are. One of Richard's teammates is getting an arrow ready and Jake questions Richard if he thinks they are faster than the time it would take to remove his head. Richard grits his teeth. As Jake walks away he says he'll be watching them. As Richard whispers something to his teammate, Jake thinks that according to him Carolyn should be safe since they need her. If they want her happy they would, at least protect Adam too. He continues thinking that, and with that threat Richard should think twice before messing with the others. Jake and his teammates may not see eye to eye, but it's not like he wants to see them in danger. Adam asks Jake to wait a minute. Casper asks Jake what that was. He grabs Jake's shoulder and asks if he is leaving. Jake scratches his head and tells them that he is and that he has his own goals for the tutorial. He grabs Casper's and Adam's shoulders and says that this is good for their survival rather than on their own. He tells them not to worry and that he will check in. Adam tells Jake to wait. He reaches in his pouch and gives Jake potions as he gives his goodbyes. Jake nods and says thank you. Then he starts walking away. The yellow-headed guy is wanting to do something to Jake, but Richard says no. He then sends someone else to do it. The archer is with a small group and says to them that it was a waste of time. He continues by saying if they weren't getting cozy with the healer he would have just shot him in the back as he walked off. A blue-haired guy in the group laughs and says he's probably not even on level 5 yet. The archer smiles and tells them to just get it over with. Then 2 arrows are soaring through the air and hit the blue guy in the eyes. The archer looks around trying to find where they came from. Then another arrow flies through the air, hitting one of the guys in the throat. The rest of the team scatters. 2 of the guys are hiding near a bush. The archer hears some noise in a direction and thinks he's over there. He tells the guy to go get him. When he looks in the spot he finds nothing. Then Jake is suddenly above him with his sword. Jake then slits the man's throat. The archer then shoots a shot at Jake which hits him on his back, but Jake just pulls it out and smiles creepily at him. The archer shoots more arrows at Jake, but Jake jumps away, making the arrows hit a tree instead. Jake looks and sees that archer. He slowly pulls out an arrow and gets ready to shoot at him. The archer then looks up and notices Jake missed his shot. Jake's arrow hit a branch instead and the branch fell on the archer. But he blocks it, but loses sight of Jake. Jake is behind him getting his sword ready. Jake then stabs him in the back and keeps the sword there for a bit. Jake looks back and says that he hears them, as we see the last person trembling, scared of Jake telling him to stay back. Jake only smiles creepily at her in response. As they walk, Richard asks Adam to tell him more about the archer. Adam says that there is not much to say about Jake and says that they were just co-workers before everything happened. Richard is suspicious and says just co-workers and says Adam seemed awfully friendly as he left. Adam explains that he was a manager back in the office and says protecting his team comes naturally to him. Richard pats him on the back and says that's a respectable trait and he hopes that he doesn't think of him as a threat. Since things got a bit tense back there, he taps Adam on the chest and says he assures him that Adam's teammates will not be harmed in the camp and that they will work together to survive. Adam is confused when Richard says the words camp. Richard smugly says of course and he asks Adam if he thought this was all of them. Richard then introduces them to the camp. He smiles and says it's not much but it's growing every day. Carolyn says that the camp is amazing while Bertram says it's not bad. Casper is in awe and thinks that it's perfect. Adam asks Carolyn what she thinks. She says it's not a 5-star hotel but it's better than a cave. Richard guides them in and says some of his men can show them where they can sleep. He tells them to please get comfortable. Something goes off and Casper asks his team if they can hear that. Someone starts running towards them. Richard yells for the guards. The yellow-haired guy gets ready, while Adam is confused. Richard then says to stop and says it's one of them. Richard asks where Nicholas is and questions what happened to her squad. She says they're dead. Surprised, Richard asks if Nicholas betrayed him. He asks if he killed all of them, but she says he died too. He yells in surprise. She says that the archer ambushed them. He yells at her saying that if he killed everyone then why is she alive? She says because he wanted me to deliver a message. She says he wanted him to know that Nicholas fought well and that he was serious about what he said earlier. Richard grabs her by the collar and says what else? With fear she confessed that he is not normal. He enjoyed killing them, and that he is a monster. We cut to Jake who looks dirty and tired. He thinks that he should find a place to rest and that things have been non-stop since yesterday. He thinks at least now he has a second to go through some system notifications. As he looks he sees that he has risen to level 7 with +1 free stat point. He is surprised he is on level 7, and thinks that it looks like he leveled up a few times from all the fighting. He looks at his free points and thinks about what stats it should go to. He thinks that endurance or vitality would be useful if these all-nighters become a regular thing. He then thinks that perception has the best synergy with his bloodline ability. He puts the points in perception. As he looks at his stats, he notices that he has less than a third of his HP left. He then thinks that the archer landed a good shot. He rubs the now healed wound and thinks that he has to be more careful now since he doesn't have Carolyn to heal him. Adam did spare him a couple of potions, but he needs to make those last. He then notices that he is surrounded by wolves. He smiles and says, "Think about bad timing." We cut to Carolyn making her tent as the yellow-haired boy approaches. He asks if her name is Carolyn and she confirms. She then points out that he is one of Richard's fighters. He covers his face saying that he is embarrassed. He sits by her and apologizes if he came off as scary and promises that he isn't one of those crazy guys. He introduces himself to her saying his name is William. Carolyn points out that he looks a lot younger than the others. He says he knows, and that's why he tries so hard to fit in. No one wanted to let a 19-year-old in the party, so he had to put on an intimidating act. He scratches his cheek and says that he swears he's just a normal kid just trying to survive this thing. Carolyn is shocked and says, "You poor thing." After that, the kid gives a menacing smile. It cuts to the next day as we then see the wolves that surrounded Jake are all dead. A rabbit starts to sniff some leaves, then a hand suddenly comes out of them. Jake then asks himself how long he was out. He looks up and notices that it's morning. He brushes the leaves off and thinks to himself that he's a mess. No point in cleaning if he's going to fight again though. He thinks that he is on his own and it's time to get to work. He kills the rabbit, gets ready to kill a bird, tries to kill a hog, and kills a monster. He thinks to himself that leveling up to level 10 in one day isn't so bad. He then notices a glint in a tree and questions what it is. He thinks if it is a trap but dismisses it since he does not sense any danger. He thinks there's no way to know unless he investigates. He starts climbing the tree. Once he gets to it, he notices that it's a jewelry box. He grabs it and the system shows a notification saying that it's called a magical jewel lockbox. In common, the description says it's a system-created magical lockbox containing rare and powerful items. Jake looks at where it says the system was created and simplified it down to just being loot. He opens it and sees that it has leather bracers of the Novice Rouge in common. The description says it's a pair of bracers designed for new initiates in the Order of Umbra. Enchanted are self-repair, +5 agility, +3 strength, and increases the effectiveness of all stealth skills. He picks up the bracers surprised, but he has no idea what the Order of Umbra is, but the stats are more than welcome. He notices something else in the box. The name is the Tutorial Equipment Upgrade Token Rarity Common. The description says it upgrades any basic starting item from the tutorial to common rarity. He thinks that upgrading the bow would be nice, but it feels useful already. He then questions what an upgrade for his cloak would do. He then upgrades the cloak thinking if it could get mending that alone would be worth it. The cloak then starts to fix itself. He then sees that his archer's cloak has been upgraded to common. The description says it's an upgraded cloak resistance to slashing attacks. The enchant it has is self-repair. He thinks that resistance to slashing is not impressive, but the self-repair will come in handy. He then thinks that he should find more loot boxes and that there are probably some rare ones in tough places. He thinks back to the spider and thinks that it was the strongest beast he's come across so far, and according to video game logic it must have been guarding something. He pushes past grasses and thinks that he won't be able to get back in there after the rockfall. He looks past the cliffs and thinks that maybe there's another cave around here. Thank you for watching until the very end. Please like and subscribe, and if you guys want a part 3 please comment down below.